So here we are again with the main line of Berlin endgame. This is going to be the last part. And we start with e4, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, knight f6, short castle, knight takes e4, d4, knight d6, bishop takes c6, d takes c6, d takes e5, knight goes to f5, queen takes d8, king takes d8, knight c3, king e8, this is the variation we are playing, h3, bishop e7, and now instead of bishop g5, instead of bishop f4 or other moves like b3, knight e4, the most dangerous move from the side of white is g4. Black is forced to go to h4, white takes on h4, of course black takes back, and now white has to decide what he wants to do. He can try to play very fast with f4, which is not so good, and he can play slowly by playing king g2, with the idea after h5 to play f3 and to keep this pawn structure and to try to slow by slow improve his position. So first let's see what happens after f4. Black reacts with a standard way, he plays h5. In this situation black has to play active, because otherwise white will simply play f5, bishop f4, rook a d1, and black will get a very bad position, so he has to open the lines for his rooks and for the bishops. h5, f5. If instead white plays g5, then bishop goes to f5. Black already wins the pawn c2 because white cannot protect it, and it seems that the bishop h4 is trapped, but there is no way how white can get it. And in addition, black wants to play f6, opening the position and allowing his bishop to come back into the game. So giving up all the white squares is pretty risky. Why bishop f5 and not bishop h3? Because after bishop takes h3, in some variations after rook d1, here the bishop h4 might be in danger, because later white, when the bishop goes from h3, white can play king g2 and then probably rook h1. The simplest version of it is when black plays bishop f5, king g2, bishop takes c2, rook h1, and the bishop h4 is lost. For this reason bishop f5 is stronger. Don't open the h file. So after h5 white should play f5, black takes on g4, white takes on g4, and black has a strong move, namely g6. So the idea of black is to open the lines. He wants to take on f5 and to play rook h5. If white takes on g6, black takes on g6, now pawn g4 hangs and gets lost. If white plays e6, black first takes on f5, e takes f7, king takes f7, g takes f5, and we can see that obviously the position of black is better. He plays bishop d7 and rook a to g8. Actually I think that black is already winning here. So this means that trying to play f4, f5 immediately doesn't bring white an advantage. On the opposite, it's rather black who plays for victory. So white should play slowly. King g2 is the best continuation. Black plays h5. In this position, in this pawn structure, black has to try to open the h file for his rook. Otherwise the rook stays on h8 without anything to do. In addition, by playing h5, black forces white to play f3. Now bishop e6 is a standard move. Alternatively, black can play a5, I think I did it once myself in the game against Katronias. This game was one of the examples how black can defend the position by simply keeping the pawn structure as is. So a5, white plays a4. This is, as I mentioned in the last part, always good for black to force white to put his pawns on white squares, because later in the endgame pretty often the white squared bishop of black can enter into the position of white through the diagonal b1 h7, and then white gets into troubles. In this pawn structure, when the pawn is on g4, this is pretty difficult, but still later on it is throughout possible. So b6, this is standard, rook d1, bishop goes back to e7. What black has to take care of is that at some point white might be able to play g5 and then rook d4. So in this situation, for example, if black plays bishop d7 or bishop b7, then g5, rook d4 in the next move, and black is in trouble. So it's always good to bring the bishop back, because he has done his task on h4, he has nothing to do there anymore. So bishop goes to e7, knight e2, bishop d7, bishop f4, c5, taking the square d4, bishop g3, rook d8. As I said, usually it's good for black to exchange one pair of rooks. c4, bishop c8, b3. After all, this turned out to be a standard position for this variation. Rook takes d1, rook takes d1, h takes g4, h takes g4, bishop d8. Katronias tried to win this for about 40 moves, but didn't succeed, because black can simply keep the bishop on d8, put the rook on h7 if the white knight comes to h5, and play bishop e6, bishop d7. White cannot make any progress here. I think many games afterwards have been played, and in none of them white could really succeed, only if black made a crucial mistake. So a5 is possible to play in move number 14. But let's see what happens after bishop e6, which has been played more often. Bishop e6, bishop e3. White simply develops his pieces. Bishop e7. Again, also in this position, black can play a5. This is my favorite move. An Armenian Grandmaster played against me g5, which was not too good because of bishop f5. Again, pawn c2 hangs, and it is not to see how white can get the bishop h4. So white played rook ac1, rook d8, knight e2, rook d5, forcing white to play f4, and then after f6 black got a very comfortable position. E takes f6, g takes f6, knight d4, bishop e4 check, king h2 and king f7 with idea rook e8. And after all, black was better and won. Here note that the bishop on h4 is actually not bad at all. He controls the square e1, and this allows black to play rook e8 and create pressure on the e file. So a5 is possible also here. But I want to show you the classical way how it's possible to play this position without a5. So bishop e7, knight e2, rook d8, Knight goes to f4, and here it is important to know the following position, that black can afford to play g6, and this position after all is equal. Let's see why. So rook fd1 is the main move. A very interesting trap is if white takes on h5. After g takes h5, knight takes e6, of course black is worse. Here he has not enough to keep draw. But after taking on h5, black, instead of taking back, black has a very strong move, bishop f5. Now h takes g6, this is forced. If instead white protects the pawn, let's say by rook ac1, then black plays g5, knight has to go back to e2, bishop goes back to e6, forcing white to play knight g3, and then simply a5, and despite the fact that white won the pawn, he cannot achieve any progress. The pawn h5 is weak, pawn a2 hangs already, because after b3 black will be able to play a4. So all in all, the position of black is okay. In addition, if you don't want to play g5, when the bishop moved from e6, now you can simply take on h5. This is also good. And then rook g8 or h4. White lost the square f5, and this means that black can play even for an advantage. Maybe g takes h5 is even better than g5. So g takes h5, bishop f5, h takes g6, f takes g6, and the problem for white now is that pawn c2 hangs, and at the same time black wants to play g5 and bishop takes h3, so white cannot protect everything. He has to play rook h1, bishop takes c2, knight goes to e6, rook d3, rook a e1, bishop b4, knight f4, rook goes back to d7, rook e2, and bishop f5. And because black controls all the white squares, and in addition he will start moving his pawns on the queen side, in the next move he might play c5, or first b6, then c5. I think that the position of black is even slightly better. White pawns are not dangerous because they are not really moving. After e6, black can simply play rook d6 or rook d8, and white doesn't have anything. Two bishops will create him a lot of troubles here. Which means that taking on h5 is not good. So white played rook fd1, a6, prophylactical move so that the pawn doesn't hang, b3, rook d7, white played knight d3 and made it pretty easy for black. What you need to know necessarily is that this endgame after knight takes e6, f takes e6, rook takes d7, king takes d7 is draw. There is no way white can come through this castle of black. After rook d1 you put your king on e8, and then you simply can play rook h7, rook h8 and wait for what your opponent does. The drawback of this position and of this variation as a whole is that black cannot play active, he cannot play for win, but playing Berlin endgame means that you are ready to accept draw, actually. So if you can keep this position without any troubles, then you have achieved your goal.